How the bloody hell are we going to get this lot back to town?
Dun, dun, dun.
That was amazing, babe.
Loved the campaign. Oh my god.
Oh, that was incredible. Right.
So many high die rolls, and look at how much we killed.
I know. Right. Okay. How about Mines of Fandelver then?
Alright, yeah, sounds good.
What are you doing? No! Mines of Fandelver?
Are you mad? So you've just finished your first D&D campaign, playing a module bought from wherever. And now you're about to start your second game, and you're choosing the module. No. No. Modules are great when you're starting out, but by the time you've done one, that's it. It's time to move on and become an adult D&D player. So we've finished our first campaign, and now we're going to do a campaign properly by adulting. Cheers.
Cheers.
Now, there is more than one way to run a game. I, for example, am a very improv GM.
And I am a semi-improv GM, but I focus more on the world building and the setting and improv from there.
Well, I build the world too, and that's a good place to start when you're planning your next campaign. What world is it in? There are so many world building videos on YouTube. Go seek some out. I've done some myself, as has Jay. The rogue GM, by the way, who's guesting on my channel today. Hello. I've got a drinking problem. So when you've built your worlds, of course, the other thing you're going to be building is your villain. And this is where some people make terrible mistakes. The villain that you don't meet until the final scene. Oh my god! Why would anyone do that?
And also villains that are inexplicably evil and have no human qualities whatsoever, and therefore your players can't relate to them in any way, shape or form.
Indeed. Villain should be somebody that the characters sympathise with on some level. The players should be able to understand where the villain is coming from. Now, there are a couple of ways to frame each segment of your adventure. You can do an episodal adventure where each evening is a self-contained story. And when you do that, that story should contain all the elements of a good story. Like when you watch Star Wars, in each film makes sense in its own right, but they're also part of a larger picture.
Or there is another way to do it, which in my opinion is a more common way for DMs to run their campaigns, where there is this overarching plot, slowly things are revealed, but not necessarily every single session, and a good DM will decide when to end based on something exciting appearing, something finishing off, and of course timing. So you've got your big bad villain, but then what about NPCs, non-player characters? Quite often they're sort of thrown in as a bit insignificant, but remember that they have their own lives as well outside the PCs interacting with them. So give them little mini stories.
And do this for your main villain too. You see, the villain's story should evolve during the course of the adventure or campaign, just as your heroes do. So as your heroes are gaining power, things are happening with your villain too. Don't keep them static and waiting for the players. Don't be too attached to your original story. Why am I talking so close to the camera? This is important! I'm just going to sit down because that felt far too aggressive for me.
Ross.
Civilised, you see. Your original story at the start of the campaign might sound awesome and be great and stuff, but don't fix it in stone. So those are some ideas about putting together a campaign, but how do you actually plan that first session? Now, some people give the advice that you should have one fight, one puzzle, one role-playing encounter, one trap. To that. It's no.
So what I would do is I would take all my general ideas from world building and the villains, and then create a small, slightly isolated situation that the players can really chomp onto. So perhaps they've just joined up, or some fairly small problem is happening in a community, and that brings them together.
One of the problems I have at the start of a campaign is quite often they can take a long time to really get going. And I like to solve that by starting the players off in the thick of action. A lot of players are worried about questions like, do we know each other, and so forth. And actually, that's less important. What's more important is getting to know these new characters. So I'll start them off in a chase sequence, or with an explosion happening, or with a building collapsing, or a dragon arriving. Something major and catastrophic that really sets up the whole campaign starting with a bang. So I tend to start by having 3 or 4 encounters in mind at the beginning of the first session. In between those encounters, the players can do anything and say anything. They're just frameworks of ideas that I can drop on to whatever the players do. And I start with really not much more planned than that, because if the players change direction, I might need to completely throw that plan away.
For me, the very first encounter is pretty linear and also very, very intense. So if you imagine a sort of a line chart, it starts off sort of a bit lukewarm before getting really, really high in intensity, and then once the aftermath of that intense encounter takes place, the players have time to recover, but then also a situation comes about. So for example, if you've got this train that's going way too fast towards a broken bit of track that has been blown up by some mysterious faction, they've got to deal with that, and then once they get off this train safely, they have to recover. And then the situation of, well, who the hell blew up the track came along. And that's when I kind of make it more sandboxy, but the setup is very linear.
If you've been watching this video and you just think, wow, there's just 2 people randomly saying about these abstract ideas, what does this all mean? I still don't know where to start. Well, if so, I'm sorry, but we tried to get you away from the lusty minds of Fandel. Sorry, I was thinking about later. I was trying to get you away from the lost minds of Fandelver. Or any other module. The problem with modules, the problem.
One of the many problems of modules.
They suck.
They're already set up too much. It's like a novel, and the problem is, even if you're a very open-minded author who's written a module, you're going to assume that players are going to do things, but they're not going to. Players are so different everywhere, they're going to think of something that you've never thought of, always.
The modules are static, that's the problem. I don't think it's possible to write an adventure, put it in a book, and make it anywhere near as good as one that you can write yourself if you're a half-decent GM. But to be a half-decent GM, first you've got to be a beginner GM. So give it a go, get out there, and start running adulting D&D games. Cheers!
Cheers.